Okay, welcome to the Back to School Special, helping visitors connect with your church's vision. I'm Gunnar Johnson, and I'm joined by Jay Sterling and Megan Brown. We're glad to have you, and this podcast is loaded full of great stuff. So please take notes, but if you don't take all the notes that you want and you miss something, it's okay. We'll send you the slides anyways, because we're generous and we love you, and that's just how we roll. So let's jump on into this presentation. Here we go. Next slide. Stewardships and outreach. You ever considered your stewardship or generosity ministry as an outreach? Well, I got to tell you, it's a tremendous outreach opportunity. Stewardship and generosity are things that are on people's mind. In fact, did you know 1 in 4 Americans say that money is the thing that they think about the most on a daily basis? Can you imagine? This is what they are thinking already. So why not, as a church leader, go ahead and engage with them? Find where they are and go to them. Jesus, 17 out of 38 of his parables were on money. There's 2,300 scriptures on money and possessions in the Bible. It's a topic of interest, and there's tons of great material all through scripture on money. You just have to get educated and then get really creative on using money as a topic to encourage people to connect with the church. So you have to go through this process of teaching them what you want for them, not what you want just from them. There's so many benefits to teaching on generosity and stewardship. In fact, don't ever apologize for speaking on generosity because it's for their benefit. Did you know that being generous is actually good for your health? According to a study by psychologist Liz Dunn in the Scientific American Journal, they reported that your cortisol levels are lower in response to giving money away. So being generous has a health benefit. So you wouldn't apologize for showing them how to be healthy. Let them know, hey, there's great reasons to be generous. Here's a few of them. Researchers from the University of Buffalo found a link between giving and unselfishness. It creates a lower risk of early death. Giving and unselfishness makes you live longer. Isn't that fun? Don't just believe me in these scientific research reports. Psalm 41, verse 1 through 3, God gives you some really creative promises. He says, "Blessed is the one who considers the poor. In the day of trouble, the Lord will deliver him." You have days of trouble? Everybody has days of trouble. The Lord protects him and keeps him alive. He is called blessed in the land. You do not give him in front of his enemies. You don't not protect him in front of his enemies. The Lord sustains him even on his sick bed. In his illness, you restore him to full health. Now, who is that? That's someone who's blessed by God for being generous. You know, generosity is also good for your marriage. Generosity is one of the key factors for a happy, healthy marriage, according to a 2001 National Marriage Report. People that are generous are happier in their marriage just by making little bitty tiny efforts to serve their spouse in small ways. So how do you incorporate that into your church? It's great. There's a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great ways. And the team will talk more about some of those things in just a little bit. In fact, you know, generosity also leads to blessing. I'm not talking about like a health and wealth, greed and materialism. I'm just giving you basic biblical principles and truths that are not made up by me. They're in Scripture. Proverbs 11:24 says, "One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessings will be enriched, and the one who waters, he himself will be watered." I was in a room of a bunch of senior pastors who were well known. We were having a great discussion. Dave Ramsey had brought all this team together, and one of the guys said something to the effect of he didn't want his people to be prosperity minded. And I paused, I raised my hand and said, wait a minute. Don't you mean that you don't want your people to be greedy, materialistic, self-centered, and idolatrous? And he said, yeah, that's really kind of what I mean. But as church leaders, we've looked at the big-haired 1980s fiascos and disasters of greed, and we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater and decided not to touch on generosity. although there's tons and tons of wonderful scriptural promises that talk about the benefits of being generous. So we as church leaders have got to take this topic back. And then we've got to be careful ourselves to engage in a healthy way in our personal lifestyles around it. So challenge your visitors to get engaged with their full life to do something in the kingdom. You know, people today are starved for real community. They're looking for a place to call home. They want friends. Social media has caused them to drink from the fire hydrant of salt water. It will not fulfill socially what they're looking for. Churches have a wonderful opportunity to create that natural camaraderie, that natural family, that natural social outlet that people are looking for. Challenge visitors to get engaged. You know, the days, I strongly believe, the days of showing up to church, watching a great show with smoke machines and lights and good music is going by the wayside. Yes, church is extremely important, but our generation that is coming up right now, the millennial generation, the one behind them, they really, really want to engage to do something. They don't want to just hang out in a country club church setting to watch a good show. They want to do something that really, really matters. So the question for you, church leader, are you an Ephesians 4 type equipper of the saints? I'll give you that passage starting in verse 11. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to do what? Well, to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body, until we all attain to the unity of faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood and to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. We got a lot of work to do, and there's an audience full of people that have tremendous spiritual gifts that God places within our church. Let's get them out. Let's get them doing something in ministry. And when a visitor comes into your congregation, he ought to know really early, wow, this is a church that I can engage. They're going to use me. They're going to equip me. They're going to help me do something with my life that really matters. Ask them to investigate your congregation and really consider, is this where God wants me? If it's not, maybe he wants them down the street at the next church. But, you know, purpose has become the latest business buzzword. Even in the business community, people are catching on to this whole purposeful, purpose-driven, purpose whatever, let's make a difference type language. Millennials are leading that charge as a generation that wants to love what it's doing. The people that are visiting your church, they want to love getting engaged in your church as well. However, as our society evolves, we start to edge further up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow, a noted psychologist, states that human motivation is based on people's seeking of fulfillment and charge or change through personal growth. See, self-actualized people who are really content with their lives, are those who are fulfilled doing what they're capable of doing. They want to make a difference. And that's biblical. That's God-given. And back to Ephesians 2, verse 10, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ for good works. He made us this way. So those works which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them. God made us to do good works. He made us to engage. And the churches that figure out how to engage new people quickly are going to be the ones who really grow and really charge folks up and make a difference in their society and community. So help them see how they'll be involved in changing society through the collective efforts of your church. They'll love you for it. They'll engage. They'll be generous with their time. They'll be generous with their resources, and they'll be generous givers who are not just simply taking up resources within the church. You can do this. They want to do it. They're just looking for the opportunity to get engaged. So my colleagues, Jay and Megan, they have some fantastic insight on that. So Mr. Jay, it's all yours.
Thank you, Gunnar. Appreciate it. So we want to dive in and talk about creating systems to reach visitors. So I have some great info here, some very practical steps you can take. So let's dive right in. To begin, even before you start penciling out the flow of a system, and remember, systems are this. If you're taking notes, write this out. Systems are intentional pathways or processes for connecting guests, all right? So systems are intentional pathways and processes for connecting guests. So even before you begin to build this intentional process, you need to define your targets. What do I mean by that? Well, a few questions. What is your overall mission? What are you trying to accomplish? What are the desired end results? Is that for them to fill out a contact card? Is that as far as it goes? Is it for them to join a small group? What are those end game results and how you get them there? And then you also need to consider your present and desired reach, all right? What sort of people are you already serving? Is that your target audience, or are you missing young families? Or are you missing seniors? Who is your reach currently, and who are you looking to reach? So you need to consider that reach, and that will also impact how you build your system to reach guests, all right? So every system needs to be simple and clear, all right? And oftentimes you see processes that have many different webs and spokes going out. So for instance, a terrible system is having many people on the front end of assimilating guests or assimilating visitors. Somebody walks through your doors. Hey, I want to get involved. Oh, you need to talk to Shirley about that. Well, oh, I was interested in this. Oh, here's another name for you. So over a course of information, you're sending them to 10 different people. That is confusing. It's very broad. It's not simple. And probably your own staff doesn't even know what the intended process is. So your system needs to be simple and clear. Oftentimes, strategic shifts are needed. Some of these are even as simple as changing your vocabulary. Even the word visitor, I would argue, is wrong. There's a difference between a visitor and a guest. When you have a visitor at your house, that's like somebody knocking on your door. They're there to sell you some candy bars or try to convert you to some cult or religion. That's a visitor. A guest is a completely different heart and mindset. You're expecting them to ring their doorbell. You're ready for them with a cold drink of water. You're ready to serve them dinner or whatever it is. So a strategic shift is even considering your vocabulary. What are you using? What are your staff using for vocabulary, and your frontline volunteer greeters, bulletin people, etc.? What are the vocabulary they're using? Sometimes organizational structure and assignments need to be updated. That's a strategic shift, even organizational structure. Communications and programming tweaks are often needed to get the system right. When I was the executive pastor, we got rid of quite a few programs that were distracting from our target and the simplicity and clarity of our system. So we changed our programming to be efficient. Also, here in Reno, Nevada, we have In-N-Out. I'm not sure where you're at today, but they have something called the secret sauce. And you can even get a burger with animal style. If you don't know what animal style is, I encourage you to look it up. But the secret sauce when it comes to reaching and connecting visitors is relationship. So is your system breeding relationship, or is it all information-based? Are there live interactions and invitations to engage with others, or is it just a transactional relationship? What does that look like in your system? All right, next, need you to begin to think virtual to personal. Don't need you to, but I suggest you begin to think virtual to personal. Here's what I mean. People come to your organization from all sorts of different places, They might have heard about you on the radio. They might have talked to a neighbor, a coworker, and most likely their experience with you, point number 2 here, begins long before they even attend a church worship service. They visited your webpage. Does it represent who you are accurately? It's almost comical at times to visit a church's website who I'm working with, or I'm just doing some research, and they have this amazing website and people are raising their hands and there's like laser shooting, like Gunnar was talking about, through the air. But when you attend in person, it is anything but that. And so right there's a disconnect. But people experience you typically this day and age before they even set foot on your campus or in your facility. So what does that experience look like? You need to think virtual to when they actually get there in person, and then think through what are those connection points, and are those connection points, again, clear, and are they simple? All right. So if you go to a fancy restaurant, oftentimes you might be treated to something called an amuse-bouche. That's a French word. And what happens is the chef who's going to cook your dinner serves you for gratis, free, brings you food to begin to whet your appetite for what's about to come. Oftentimes it's given out with a special drink, and it gets your mouth ready for the taste to come and give you kind of the style of the chef who's preparing your food. And in Reno, again, we have many buffets, and I love them. They're great, but buffets are not amuse-bouche. Buffets throw everything out there for you: Mongolian barbecue, salad bar, desserts. You just pick and choose. So much of ministry and the church in churches has been run like a buffet and not amuse-bouche. What I mean by that is amuse-bouche is very intentional. It's very specific. It's very planned. Buffets, sure, you have a plan for what you're going to cook, but it's just a consumeristic base. You choose what you want, and you get as much as you want, when you want, how you want, and that does not work. The days are over where you can just have a menu at your church of, hey, we invite you to join our church and participate with us because we have this and that and this and that, and just take a pick and it'll work. It doesn't work. Encourage you to be very intentional and know your system. It demands having great follow-up, second, third, fourth, fifth, and ongoing contact points, and it demands tracking. If you don't know where people are at, you're going to lose them. You're going to have a large back door. Within Mortarstone, you can build processes of tracking contacts and people you're pursuing. Perhaps you use Fellowship One or another database. Whatever you use, you need to use something. Don't lose people. God has brought them to you to take care of. That should fire you up. We need to be intentional. We need to have follow-up, and we need to track. So let me go ahead and give you an example, all right? I already mentioned that people come with many different ideas and from many different places. And so I encourage you to lead with 3, okay? Lead with 3 connection points. Needs to be easy, needs to be clear, and you need to trust the process. Because, here's what I mean by that. If you can get people, if you can get guests to the first step, the second step of your system, and to that third step, they're going to stick. And not only will they stick, they're going to feed into all of the ministries that you offer and serve people with. So you have to trust the process. Oftentimes I would make my staff angry, or volunteer leaders disappointed because they were not the first announcement in the bulletin, or they were not the first announcement from on stage. And we didn't even promote them because we knew, again, if they came to the beginning of the system, the intentional, clear system, with the 1, 2, and 3 steps, they would stick for the long term. So let me give you an example. This next slide will show you arrows that people are coming in from all different ways, and they're coming. And typically they can be boiled down into 2 groups. People that are already Christ followers or have a context for the good news of Jesus, or B, not followers. And they experience you in many different ways. Maybe it's an outreach, Sunday mornings, might be your website, whatever. So they're coming in, you have that deal. Now, you need to know, okay, their first step past that is this. It's number 1. Number 1 will flow to a 2 and a 3, all right? What I saw that worked in our environment and context is that we began with a family-style meal. We moved away from doing an information-based, this is our church, this is our doctrine, this is how we do baptism, here's women in leadership, thanks for coming, have a good night. If you want to be a member, sign here. That was not working for connecting people, and it lacked the secret sauce, which is relationship. So we had a family style meal. It was 2 hours long. That's important because our first asks shouldn't be this massive, long, give us your life, give us the next 4 months. It should be quick and easy in today's society and culture. So we recommend your first step being short, being very relational, and being more experiential rather than informational. Your second step will ask a little bit more. For us, you can see that people would flow from A, or number 1, to begin. It's that down arrow you see there. That was a 4-week experience, relation-based. From there, it would flow into Rooted, which is a great, great, great connection resource that Mariners Church in Southern California has adopted actually from one of their missionary churches in Africa. It's an amazing resource. And then Rooted was a 10-week program. And then once they finished that, they had relationship, they had connection, and that went into long-term community-like small groups. So I just want to give you a quick flow chart of possible 1, 2, and 3 steps. I'd love to answer any questions you have or talk about your current system. And I hope that just gets you thinking about what it could look. All right. Now, I want to give you lastly a few essentials for connecting guests. Remember, guests, not visitors. Vocabulary matters. Experience trumps information. We need to think virtual to personal. We need to build the right team. Are the right people talking to your guests and visitors? Do you have the right administrator having those phone calls on a Tuesday or Monday or Wednesday morning with people that have come in the door for the first time or people that gave for the first time? Or are they not the right person? So must build the right team, staff and volunteers. We need to pursue people, not just wait for them to come to us, but have an actual system and idea and strategy for pursuing people, follow through, and again, we need to track. And so at the end of this webinar, you're gonna be given a few resources and opportunities to take next steps. Again, I'd love to have conversations with you. There's a link to my blog and a book I've written that Begin, that 4-week experience is something that's at the back of this book, Begin. And it's the actual material we used in my former context to connect many people to our church. So encourage you to check that out. Nikki will talk more about that here when we end. And Megan's gonna bring us home with the last bit of information.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. I hope y'all are having a good time. I'm so glad to be with you at whatever part of the day it is that you're at. And just thanks for taking the time to listen to this. Kind of to tie a big red bow around the things that both of these gentlemen have said, when we're thinking about visitors that are both outside and inside of our church, we need to be able to have a thought process of, are we, when we're going to communicate with them, are we examining our visitors, and are we able to say we're attracting the right audience? Are we identifying the visitors so that we can engage and relate with them, to then do the last thing, which is execute and activate those visitors to assimilate into our overall church culture and mission and vision of what we are called to do in our community? So I want to say that one more time. Are we examining both our visitors inside of the church, because there's those, and outside of the church, to make sure that we are engaging and relating, identifying who they are, so that we can then execute a plan of action to communicate with them, to activate them into our overall church culture? So there are 2 groups of visitors, right? The 2 groups of visitors are those who are still outside of our church that have not visited our church, and those who are inside of our church that are still visiting, or quote unquote, trying our church on for size. We want to have those people assimilate into our overall church culture, place some of their heart into what it is that we're trying to do in our community, and then grab onto the vision and mission and run with it full steam so that the gospel could be advanced and preached. So I wrote down this question thinking about, well, what can you do? How can you be intentional to attract the right audience to then engage and relate with? So I wrote this down. Can I be intentional with data? Is there real data on people in our community that we want to communicate with? And is there something that we can use that is data related for people who are already inside of our church, but maybe are not fully activated, haven't actually engaged and taken that next step to assimilate into the overall church culture? So yes, there is an answer for that. And we want you to be able to know that this is something that Mortarstone can and would love to be able to help you with. It's called our Data Enrichment Report. So our Data Enrichment Report is something that goes out and looks at what's going on in your actual community. It takes what you guys takes information and looks at things like age composition of your community, education levels, length of residency, things that have been put out on public record for occupation or for volunteer opportunities, propensities such as financial capacity within your community. It looks at all kinds of these different propensities and different parameters of data that are available for you to say, are we, with our visitors, actually attracting the right kind of people that line up to our vision and our mission statement? There are probably tons of churches in the community in which you live in, and each one of you may have a unique proposition. While all of us are called to advance the gospel and have the Great Commission to take Jesus to the ends of the earth, we each have something that's just probably a tiny bit different that fits the culture and the vision of the church that we've established that Jesus is wanting to attract. So you want to be intentional with the people who you've not yet reached in your community, how to communicate with those people and know, am I attracting the right target audience for the people in my community to go out and execute the vision and mission statement of our church, to activate them, to equip them, to encourage them, and to assimilate them into church culture so that they feel like they are fully immersed with every tool necessary to be able to go into the community and take Jesus to the ends of the earth. Is it important that we attract the right target audience both inside and outside the church? Absolutely, because we want to bless people. And every single one of the people who walk through the doors of our church on the weekend services, they want to be able to do what the Lord is calling them to do. And we want to be able to help them identify that. And so if they're coming into our church, of course we want people to connect and engage into our churches. But if our church isn't the right fit for them, we want to bless them and encourage them to go to a church that can help them to fulfill their mission for Jesus on their life. For the visitors that we are trying to attract, if we're intentional about looking at data in our actual community, if we're intentional about saying, are we attracting those people, then the chances of attracting the right visitors to come in the door are going to be really high. And you're going to have a higher rate of success at being able to connect with those people, engage and relate with those people, and then activate them to assimilate into your overall church culture. Also, on the inside of the church, you can take the people who have been maybe quote unquote visiting or trying out your church. And with using Mortarstone, you can tag a few different things to say, hey, can we know some of the giving patterns about the people who are coming into our church that have maybe given a gift, but have never found out next steps about our church so that we can appropriately communicate with them? Yes, both the Data Enrichment Report can help you with that, and so can tags and teams and triggers within inside of Mortarstone. We want to be able to help you succeed because we know that where people put their treasure, there their heart is also. And we want their heart to be fully connected to the gospel. We want them to be fully connected. And we know that those are warm people that change from just being a visitor to then becoming an engaged participant, agreeing with our mission and our vision statement. And it's easier to have conversations around communicating with them about next steps, about activities that are happening inside of the church. It's easier to have those conversations with people who are already identified to be warm to our church. So it's extremely important that we are both strategic and intentional at looking at real live data to make sure that we are attracting the right target audience to be able to engage and relate with, communicate with, and then activate to take the next step. The data enrichment report, you can see all kinds of that information. You that are already Mortarstone subscribers, if you want to talk about this, or you want to say, tell me more about how to tag our people so that we can identify those who are visiting within our church and then actually become active givers within our church, so we can teach them stewardship and generosity like Gunnar talked about, we would love to be able to help you get that set up. So what types of communication should you be using? The next slide. Every single absolute type of communication that you possibly can. And when you are communicating with those who are visitors outside the church who have not yet come in, and those who are inside of the church that are visiting but have not taken the next step, you want to be able to use bulletins, you want to be able to use social media, Facebook, you want to be able to use text, you want to be able to use emails, you most especially want to be able to use the face-to-face interaction or the phone-to-phone interaction of saying, I want to really build a relationship with knowing who you are. Because all of the data that I just talked about, all of the awesome processes that Jay talked about are useless if we don't build the relationship with the people and then use the information that Gunnar talked about to wrap it all up and teach them how to have their own journey of generosity with the real living God to encourage them on their next level. So we are so excited to offer you guys the opportunity to take a special that Nikki is going to talk about in a minute. It is our heart that you guys learned something from this. We're thankful that you joined us. Thank you so much for being a part of our Mortarstone family, and we just are grateful for your time today.
Hey, thank you everybody for attending the webinar today. We want to just be mindful of the time, so we don't have much time. There are a few questions that came in, and we'll include those in the email that I send out with the presentation. But just let you know, if you are not a Mortarstone subscriber and you're watching this webinar, if you schedule your demo by August 15th, you're going to qualify for that free church health audit, and then also a free copy of Jay Sterley's book, Begin. And then also, if you're a Mortarstone subscriber and would like one of Jay's book, Begin, just go ahead and email us after this, and we will get that book sent out to you. Again, if you have any questions about the data enrichment report and how it can help your church and what it looks like for you, Megan@mortarstone.com is who you can contact, and she will get back with you soon. Thank you again, everybody, for attending, and we look forward to our next webinar next month. Thank you.